I was 78 when my world shifted beneath my feet. My name's Eleanor Grayson, and for 45 years I'd been a librarian in our small town, curating books, guiding readers to stories that lit up their lives. My home, a two-story Victorian with a wraparound porch and lidded glass windows, was my sanctuary, paid off through decades of careful saving with my late husband, George. He'd been gone 10 years, taken by cancer, but his memory lingered in the oak staircase he'd refinished with his steady hands, in the rose garden he'd planted out back, their blooms still vibrant each spring. I'd raised our son, Michael, in this house, teaching him to read on that porch, cheering at his soccer games, scrimping to fund his college dreams. I thought we were close, thought he carried the values I'd instilled: respect, family, hard work. But that autumn evening showed me how wrong I was. Michael and his wife, Laura, had been staying with me for weeks. Ever since their apartment lease ended, I'd welcomed them, thrilled to have my grandchildren, Emma, 9 and Noah, 6, under my roof. I'd cook their favorite pancakes, read them bedtime stories, and let them play in the garden, hoping to pass on the love George and I had poured into this home. Laura, though, had grown distant, her smiles tight, her eyes always on her phone, planning something she never shared. Michael was quieter, avoiding my gaze, his warmth replaced by a distracted nod. That evening, as I headed to my bedroom after tucking the kids in, Laura stopped me in the hallway, her voice sharp as a blade. "Eleanor, we've got guests coming tonight. We need your room so you'll sleep in the garage." I blinked, stunned, waiting for a smile, a hint it was a joke. But her eyes were cold, her hand already on my bedroom door, turning the key, a key I didn't know she had. "It's just for one night," she added, locking it with a click that echoed in my chest. Michael stood behind her, hands in his pockets, muttering, "It'll be fine, Mom, just making it work." I stood there, my slippers rooted to the floor, my heart pounding with disbelief. This was my home, paid off with my librarian's salary and George's carpentry jobs, every corner holding a memory: our first dance in the kitchen, Michael's first steps on the staircase. And now I was being locked out, dismissed like an unwanted guest. I grabbed a blanket and pillow from the linen closet, my knees aching as I trudged to the garage. The concrete was icy under my feet, the air damp with the scent of motor oil and old wood. I set up a folding chair, its metal creaking under my weight, and wrapped the blanket around me, trying to ward off the chill. Sleep wouldn't come, not with the hum of betrayal louder than the crickets outside. I'd given them a home, cooked their meals, loved their children, and they'd relegated me to this, a cold, cluttered garage, my own bedroom stolen. The next morning, I crept back inside to make coffee, my joints stiff from the chair. As I passed the kitchen, I overheard Laura and Michael, their voices low but clear. "The room's getting $200 a night on the rental app," Laura said, her tone smug. "If we can get Eleanor into a nursing home, we can rent the whole house, $3,000 a month, maybe more." Michael murmured agreement, his voice low. "She's too old to manage alone, anyway. We'll convince her it's for her safety." My blood ran cold, my hands trembling around the blankets still draped over my shoulder. They weren't just locking me out for one night, they were renting my bedroom to strangers, pocketing the money, and plotting to push me into a nursing home, to take my house entirely. My home, worth $700,000, was nothing but a paycheck to them, a way to fund their dreams at the cost of mine. I slipped upstairs to my study, the one room they hadn't touched, and closed the door, my heart heavy with betrayal. The pain was raw, sharper than the cold of the garage, but it woke something fierce in me, a quiet, stubborn defiance. I'd built this life with George, kept it alive through grief and time. No one, not even my son, was going to steal it. I called Clara, my realtor friend, who'd known me since my library days. "Clara, I need your help," I whispered, my voice steady despite the ache. That night, in the dim glow of my study's lamp, I sat with a notebook, the one George and I used to plan our budget, and started plotting my fight. Laura and Michael thought I was too old, too frail to notice. They didn't know Eleanor Grayson, and I was ready to show them who I was. The morning after I was banished to the garage, I woke with a fire in my chest, the sting of Laura's locked door and Michael's silence burning hotter than the ache in my joints. Their plan to rent out my bedroom and push me into a nursing home to take my house was a betrayal that cut deeper than I'd ever imagined. My Victorian home, with its oak staircase and rose garden, was my life's work, built through 45 years of librarian work and saving with George. They thought I was too old, too trusting to notice their scheme, but I'd spent decades organizing knowledge, solving problems and keeping stories alive. At 78, I was sharper than they knew, and I was going to protect what was mine. I brewed coffee, the familiar ritual steadying me, and sat at my kitchen table, its surface scarred from years of family meals, George carving roasts, Michael doing homework, me grading papers late into the night. That table anchored me, a reminder of what I was fighting for. I called Clara, my realtor friend, who'd sold homes for my neighbors, and knew the town's market inside out. "Eleanor, that's unthinkable," she said when I told her about the garage and the overheard conversation. She checked her contacts and called back an hour later, her voice tight. "Laura's listed your bedroom on a vacation rental app, pulling in $200 a night. They've been pitching the whole house to investors, saying you're ready to move on and can't manage alone." My stomach churned. My home, worth $700,000, was their cash cow, a way to fund their lifestyle while I slept on a folding chair. I asked Clara to gather proof screenshots, emails, anything to show their intent. "I'll need it all," I said, my voice firm. I pulled out my financial records, spreading them across the table like a map of my life. George and I had been frugal, saving every extra dollar from my librarian's salary and his carpentry jobs. My nest egg was $900,000, safely tucked in a trust account, and the house was in my name alone, fully paid off since 2002. Michael didn't know the full extent of my savings. I'd kept it private, wanting him to build his own life. Now I saw their greed clearly. They thought I was a frail widow with a valuable house and no fight left. I called Margaret, my lawyer who'd handled George's estate with precision. I told her everything, the locked door, the rental scheme, their nursing home plan. "Eleanor, you're healthy and sharp as ever," she said, reviewing my medical records. "We can transfer the house to a trust for your grandchildren, Emma and Noah, and report the rental fraud." I told her to start the trust, locking the house away. "Make it untouchable," I said, "and fast." I drove to Clara's office that afternoon, the autumn air crisp through my car window. She showed me the evidence, screenshots of my bedroom listed online, complete with photos of my quilt, my bedside lamp, my life, advertised for $200 a night. Laura had earned $2,000 already, deposited into their account. Worse, they'd been meeting with a developer, offering the house for $720,000, claiming I was too old to manage and needed a nursing home. "They've got a brochure ready," Clara said, sliding it across her desk. My jaw tightened at the glossy pamphlet, its cheerful images of seniors playing bingo, a stark contrast to my vibrant life. I told Clara to quietly list the house for sale, targeting a buyer who'd close fast, with proceeds going to the trust for Emma and Noah. "Keep it secret," I said. "They can't know." An idea took root as I walked through my rose garden that evening, the petals soft under my fingers. What if I sold the house, moved to a smaller cottage, and started a memoir writing group, teaching others to preserve their story? I'd seen how stories connected people, from library patrons to my grandchildren. A cottage would be enough for me, and a group would keep my passion alive. I kept Laura and Michael in the dark, nodding when they called with fake concern. "Mom, that big house must be a lot for you," Michael said one evening, his voice too smooth. Laura suggested I look at senior communities for my safety. I murmured I'd think about it, buying time while Margaret worked on the trust and Clara gathered evidence. Every night I sat in my study, the one room they hadn't touched, and planned. I sketched ideas for the memoir group, workshops on writing family histories, community readings, maybe a book of local stories. The betrayal hurt, Laura's locked door a wound, Michael's silence a deeper cut. But it fueled me. I thought of George, his hands refinishing the staircase, his pride in our home. They thought I was invisible, a means to their ends. They'd forgotten the woman who'd built this life, who'd taught generations to find truth in stories. I was Eleanor Grayson, and I was already writing my comeback, one quiet step at a time. 2 months after Laura locked me out of my bedroom, and I overheard their scheme to rent my home, I was crafting a plan as carefully as I'd once curated books for my library patrons. Their betrayal turning my room into a cash grab and plotting to push me into a nursing home was a wound that cut deeper than the cold of that garage night. My Victorian home, with its rose garden and oak staircase, was my legacy, built through 45 years of love and labor with George. Laura and Michael thought I was too old, too soft to notice their greed, but I'd spent decades organizing knowledge, solving problems, and teaching others to find their stories. At 78, I was sharper than ever, and I was ready to turn their plan against them. I started each morning with coffee at my kitchen table, its scarred surface a testament to years of family. George carving Sunday roasts, Michael building model airplanes, me sorting library cards. That table grounded me, a reminder of what I was fighting for. Margaret, my lawyer, was moving fast on the trust, securing my $700,000 home and $900,000 in savings for my grandchildren, Emma and Noah. She called one morning with an update. "The trust is nearly done, Eleanor. Your assets are protected, and we've added clauses to cover any new ventures tied to the property." That was my spark, a vision to sell the house, move to a smaller cottage, and start a memoir writing group, teaching others to preserve their stories. Margaret loved the idea, promising to handle legal details and explore community grants. "They picked the wrong woman to cross," she said, and I smiled, feeling the fire of defiance grow. I met with Clara, my realtor friend, in her cozy office, the air smelling of fresh ink and autumn leaves. I shared my plan: sell the house quietly, transfer the proceeds to the trust, and buy a cottage for myself. Clara nodded, her eyes sharp. "I've got a buyer, a retired couple offering $720,000 ready to close in weeks." She estimated I could buy a cottage for $200,000, leaving plenty for the trust and my new project. I allocated $200,000 from my savings for the cottage and $50,000 for the memoir group, keeping costs low by hosting it at home. Clara agreed to keep the sale secret, listing the house discreetly to avoid alerting Laura and Michael. "They're still renting your room," she said, showing me new screenshots. $4,000 earned so far, my quilts and lamp advertised to strangers. My jaw tightened, but I stayed focused. Clara dug deeper, uncovering more. Laura and Michael had met with a developer, pitching the house for $730,000, claiming I was too frail to manage it. They'd even produced a forged consent form for a nursing home, signed in Laura's handwriting. "It's fraud," Clara said. "They're banking on you not noticing." I told her to keep gathering evidence, every rental listing, every email to the developer. Margaret confirmed the forgery was enough for legal action, but I wanted to wait, letting them think they were winning while I built my case. The sale was moving forward, with the buyers ready to sign in days. I started searching for a cottage, finding a charming one-bedroom near the library, perfect for my memoir group. I pitched the memoir writing group to the library board, framing it as a community gift: workshops to teach kids and seniors to write their family histories, preserving the town's stories. I'd seen how stories connected people, from Emma and Noah's wide-eyed wonder to my library patrons' love for local lore. The board was thrilled, offering a $15,000 grant to start, with more possible if it succeeded. I invited trusted friends, retired librarians, local writers, parents of former patrons to join. We planned workshops on memoir techniques, oral history sessions, and community readings. I named it Grayson Memoir Haven, a nod to George and our shared love of story. The cottage would be my new home, the group my new purpose. I kept Laura and Michael in the dark, playing the part of the compliant mother-in-law. They'd call, their voices dripping with false concern. "Eleanor, that big house must be exhausting," Laura said one evening, her tone too sweet. Michael suggested I look at senior communities for my health. I murmured I'd consider it, my voice calm, while Margaret finalized the trust and Clara pushed the sale. Every evening, I sat in my study, the one room still mine, sketching plans for the memoir group, workshop schedules, book lists, reading nights under the cottage's porch lights. The betrayal hurt, Laura's locked door a sharp memory, Michael's silence a deeper wound, but it fueled me. I thought of George, his hands on the staircase, his belief in my strength. They thought I was a relic, a means to their ends. They'd forgotten the woman who'd built this life, shelf by shelf, story by story. The town buzzed with whispers about my plans, volunteers offering books and time. Clara sent updates on Laura's rentals, each one a brick in my case. The trust was nearly complete, the sale days away, the cottage ready. I was building a new chapter, one where I'd come out on top, and Laura and Michael were about to learn who they'd underestimated. I was Eleanor Grayson, and I was ready to close the book on their scheme. 3 months after Laura locked me out of my bedroom, and I overheard their plan to rent my home, the sale of my Victorian house was complete. The retired couple, Clara found, had paid $720,000. The proceeds locked in a trust for my grandchildren, Emma and Noah. I'd bought a cozy one-bedroom cottage near the library for $200,000, with $50,000 set aside for my memoir writing group, leaving my remaining $650,000 in savings, secure. Clara had gathered evidence of Laura and Michael's scheme, $6,000 earned from renting my bedroom, plus emails to a developer offering my house for $30,000. Margaret, my lawyer, had proof of their forged consent form for a nursing home, a clear case of fraud. My new cottage was ready, Grayson Memoir Haven poised to launch. I was ready to turn their greed against them, and I did it quietly, like the librarian I'd always been. I'd kept Laura and Michael in the dark, letting them believe I was oblivious while they rented my room and pushed for a nursing home. They'd grown bolder, leaving senior living brochures on my kitchen table, Laura's voice syrupy as she suggested I downsize for comfort. Michael stopped by one afternoon, eyeing the oak staircase George refinished, saying I should sell old furniture to simplify. I nodded, said I'd think about it, and changed the topic, my heart steady despite the sting. Clara confirmed they'd escalated their plan, meeting with the developer again, claiming I was too frail to manage the house. The forged consent form, signed in Laura's handwriting, was their attempt to force me out legally, but I had my own plan, and it was about to unfold. I invited them for dinner, saying I wanted to discuss my future. I spent the day cooking George's lasagna, the kitchen warm with the scent of basil and tomatoes, a recipe we'd perfected together. I set the table with our old china, the plates we'd used for Michael's birthdays, for anniversaries with George, for every moment that made this house a home. They arrived at 6, Laura in a sleek dress, Michael in a pressed shirt, both exuding confidence as if they'd already won. Laura chatted about their new car, bought with my room's rental money, while Michael hinted at my big house being too much for me. I poured tea, kept my voice light, and let them talk, their smugness fueling my resolve. They thought I was a relic, a widow lost in memories, not a woman who'd outsmarted library budget cuts and skeptical patrons for decades. After dessert, apple cobbler, George's favorite, I cleared the plates and slid a folder across the table. I've made a decision about my plans, I said, my voice calm but firm, like I was addressing a library patron who'd misplaced a book. Michael opened the folder, expecting a nursing home brochure or a sale agreement they'd drafted. Instead, he saw the trust documents, the house sale contract, a flyer for Grayson Memoir Haven, with my name as founder, and copies of the rental listings and forged consent form, Laura's handwriting glaring on the page. Laura's teacup froze halfway to her lip. Michael's face paled, his hands shaking. "Mom, what's this?" he stammered. I leaned back, folding my arms. I sold the house for $720,000. The money's in a trust for Emma and Noah, untouchable. I know about the $6,000 you made renting my room, the forged nursing home form, your plan to sell my home. I nodded to the doorway, where Clara stood, unannounced, holding the rental screenshots. "The bank's frozen your accounts," she said, her tone sharp. "The fraud's reported, and the police have the documents. You're facing charges unless Eleanor says otherwise." Laura's eyes welled up, her voice breaking. "Eleanor, we were just trying to help. You're alone here." I cut her off, my tone cold. "Help yourselves, you mean. You locked me in the garage, used my home for profit. I raised you better, Michael. Michael mumbled about misunderstandings, but I pointed to the door. Get out. Until you learn respect, you're not welcome. They left, Laura weeping, Michael's head bowed, the door closing softly behind them. I exhaled, my heart steady despite the ache. I'd raised Michael, loved him through every scraped knee, every triumph, but he'd chosen greed over family. I didn't feel triumph, just clarity. The next day, I moved into my cottage, a cozy space with a small porch, perfect for memoir readings. I threw myself into Grayson Memoir Haven, planning workshops with retired librarians and writers. The library board approved another $10,000 grant, and volunteers stocked bookshelves. The betrayal hurt, Laura's locked door a vivid wound, Michael's silence deeper still, but it had pushed me to create something lasting. I thought of George, his hands on the staircase, his pride in our home. They thought they could erase me, but I was Eleanor Grayson, librarian, storyteller, fighter. The memoir group was my stand, my new cottage, a haven no one could steal, and I was ready for the next chapter. Grayson Memoir Haven opened its doors a month after I sent Laura and Michael reeling from my dining table, their stunned faces no match for the fire they'd sparked in me. At 78, I stood on the porch of my new one-bedroom cottage, its white clapboard walls glowing under string lights, as neighbors and friends gathered for our first memoir reading night. The cozy living room was set with tables for writing workshops, the spare room a library of donated journals and histories, and the air carried the scent of my small rose garden, a nod to George's love. I'd sold my Victorian home for $72,000, the proceeds locked in a trust for my grandchildren, Emma and Noah. With $200,000 of my $900,000 savings, I'd bought the cottage, and $50,000 funded the memoir group, leaving $650,000 secure. Laura and Michael's betrayal locking me in the garage, renting my room for $6,000, plotting to sell my home, had cut deep, but it had rooted me deeper, pushing me to create a legacy no one could steal. I wasn't just surviving their greed, I was thriving. The opening night was a celebration, the kind George would have loved. We held a reading on the porch, with a 14-year-old named Sophie, sharing her grandmother's story of baking bread during wartime, her voice trembling but proud. My friends, retired librarians, local writers, parents from my library days, filled the chairs, clapping warmly. Clara, my realtor, raised a glass of lemonade, her eyes bright. "Eleanor, you've turned pain into something beautiful," she said. Margaret, my lawyer, hugged me, whispering, "You showed them who you are." I smiled, my throat tight, wishing George could see it. He'd have been out here sharing his own tales, charming the crowd, his hand on mine as we laughed. Grayson Memoir Haven was more than a group. It was a community, a place where stories wove people together. We offered free workshops for kids and seniors, funded by the library board's $15,000 grant, and donations from families I'd served over the years. There was Sophie, who came weekly to write her family's history, her notebook filled with sketches and memories. There was Henry, 82, a former teacher who taught seniors to record oral history. We hosted readings every month, the porch alive with voices, sharing tales of our town, immigrant journeys, local legends, personal triumphs. I led workshops 3 times a week, teaching memoir techniques, my voice steady as I guided writers to find meaning in their past, just as I'd done for library patrons decades ago. The group wasn't just about writing, it was about giving people a voice, a purpose, a place to belong, something Laura and Michael had tried to take from me. Laura and Michael were gone from my life, at least for now. A week after the confrontation, they sent a letter, full of apologies and excuses. Laura claimed the rentals were to help with expenses, the forged nursing home form a mistake. Michael said their plans had unraveled, their accounts frozen, their debts piling up without my house to sell. I read the letter, then set it aside, unmoved. Respect wasn't a quick note or a plea, it was a way of life, and they'd chosen greed over it. Clara told me they'd lost their new car, their lifestyle crumbling under fraud investigations. I didn't gloat, it wasn't my way, but I didn't reach out either. Michael was my son, the boy I'd read to on the porch, but he'd have to earn his way back if he ever could. My new family was the writers sharing stories, the volunteers organizing readings, the community clapping under the porch lights. The town embraced the group, with more people signing up weekly, kids to document family tales, seniors to preserve their legacies. We started a summer program, teaching oral history and hosting open mic night. The library board promised another $10,000 grant to create a digital archive for local memoirs. My $650,000 savings was safe, the group breaking even, my cottage alive with purpose. Laura and Michael's betrayal, the locked door, their rental scheme had hurt, a wound that ached when I thought of Emma and Noah who hadn't visited since. But that pain had sparked a fire, one that built Grayson Memoir Haven. One evening, I sat on my cottage's porch, a notebook in my lap, planning the next reading. Writers lingered in the garden, sharing cookies, their voices bright with laughter. I told Georgie's favorite story, about his father, a carpenter who built homes during hard times, feeling his presence in the warm air. Their betrayal had cut deep, but it had pushed me to create something lasting, something that honored George, our family, and every story I'd ever shared. I wasn't just Eleanor Grayson, retired librarian, I was Eleanor Grayson, storyteller, builder, unstoppable. The stars twinkled above, and I smiled, my fingers tracing the notebook's edge. The writers waved goodnight, their voices echoing across the garden. I waved back, my heart full. Grayson Memoir Haven was my answer to betrayal, my proof that stories matter, that I was still here, still rooted. Laura and Michael had tried to lock me out, to steal my home, but they'd only made me stronger. My cottage was a haven, my stories alive, and I was just beginning to write the next chapter.